Hey everyone, we're back again with another Bazaar patch notes reading. It is the January 22nd patch, although as of right now, the patch is currently delayed for an unknown period of time. I'm recording this on Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific time, and there are no real indications of when this is actually going to go out. But I'm going to stay optimistic and hope that it says, or it is still today and it doesn't get delayed too long. And hopefully there aren't any major changes to the patch notes after I record this video. If there are, I may make a brief addendum in the comments. But let's just get right into it because I think that this is a really interesting patch, and I think it has a lot of changes that most people saw coming. But a few changes that I don't think really anyone could have seen coming because they came out of left field. So let's just go over the general changes first. Won't take long. Critical hits on multi-item outputs will now trigger for the entire output set. I was confused by this at first, but apparently it just means that like if you have an item like Force Field, which both does damage and applies shield, a crit previously would have to roll for both of those values. So you would have to crit on both the damage and the Force Field. So like if you had like 50% crit, sometimes you would crit on the damage but not on the shield, or vice versa. And that was just kind of inconsistent. I think if an item crit, it should just crit. So this should just smooth that out. It should also work for things like enchanted items, I think, and anything that has just multiple stats on like the same item. So weather glass, anything like that. So that's just a nice consistency change. Probably doesn't have a huge effect on the general power level of things other than making crit slightly stronger and making multi-output items slightly stronger. But I don't think you'll see like any major meta shifts because of this. Level up rewards now provide upgrades that utilize the pedal system instead of the pedestal system instead of the leftmost system. This is really nice because I spent a super long period of time once like debating what I wanted to upgrade. And after like 30 minutes straight of debating, I just said like, okay, I'll do this. And then I hit the button and it upgraded the wrong item because I wasn't paying attention to what my leftmost one was. So now you have to confirm what you want to upgrade by dragging it into that little pedestal at the center instead of just making sure it's the leftmost. I think that's a good change. The leftmost system kind of feels like a hack, to be honest. It kind of just feels like this is what you put in the game because we were too lazy to come up with anything better. And I think the pedestal system is a lot better for almost every situation, even if it is technically a little slower. The gumball machine encounter now supports getting 5 gumballs at a time. Huge buff. Gumballs were really annoying to have to individually buy. This is still a little frustrating for people like Pig who don't actually have 5 slots open in their backpack that often, but something is better than nothing. So happy to see Gumballs getting a nice little quality of life buff there. Not really sure what this was about. The Pearls dig site, I didn't really go there that often, and I'm not 100% sure. I think it just means that this encounter was showing up during the wrong periods of the day. So that got fixed. Cool. Fixed a bug where Sylvia, she's the silver tier item vendor, was still spawning on day 1. This was supposed to go out last patch, but it wasn't. So now hopefully it'll be in this patch. I guess we'll see. This just makes getting silver items early a little less common, which is very nice because you really shouldn't be getting silver items on day 1. They kind of are very powerful and can basically define your whole run. The Lich got nerfed by a pretty small amount, and then they removed his improved toxin skill. That's probably more of a change to make the encounter less difficult versus like making the drop pool more consistent. But it does remove what I would consider to be like a less powerful skill from the drop pool, which means Lich is even better. 1900 health is still a lot of HP, and Lich still has a lot of really, really strong skills and items that you have to contend with. So this is by no means like a gimme now. I still don't think nearly anyone can beat Lich except for specific like weapon builds. Um and Lich still kind of has an issue in my opinion where the only builds that can consistently beat him on the day that he shows up um don't really want any of his loot. Because if you're playing like a weapon build or a heavy weapon build, you don't really want the Necronomicon. So I kind of think Lich needs to be redesigned in general and maybe just changed to allow for more flexible use of his items, or maybe make it so that non-weapon items or poison builds or like infinite spam builds have a lot more chance to actually beat him versus um just being cut out. Because if we look at Lich right here, this is what Lich has. He's got freeze or slow all of your opponent's items when you freeze. He's got the thing that freezes all of your items for 2 seconds when he drops to half health. And then he doesn't have this anymore. But the Necronomicon, which is his signature item, it really screws over non-weapon builds. So when any non-weapon is used, charge this 1 second. So you can't really beat this guy with a non-weapon build, but you want this item for non-weapon builds pretty much exclusively. Like you wouldn't really want to run Necronomicon in like weapon Vanessa or like weapon pig, but you may be able to pivot based on getting this. I'm not really sure. And I think wand is still bugged. I'm not 100% sure on that, but this is definitely also like a very non-weapon build item as well. Let's move on because there's no reason to stay on that for too long. Thieves Guild Medallion and Genie Lamp removed due to bugs. I don't actually know what those were. It kind of seemed like the encounters were fine, but maybe there were some issues that I wasn't aware of. This is actually a pretty big nerf to the not to Bonk, because the Bonk guy still has some of the best drops in the game, but there was another guy who dropped Thieves Guild Medallion, I think, so that's a big nerf to him. And then Genie Lamp nerf is a huge nerf to the Treasure Turtle and to the late game Dervish guy who has like the crit skill. I kind of felt like I got these items fairly consistently when I fought them. So it's going to feel way less good to fight them for a chance to get them now, which is just kind of a shame because it was always really fun to get Genie Lamp and Thieves Guild Medallion, even though they were definitely really, really strong. Okay, let's get into the meat of the patch. The general thesis of this patch, it seems to be, is gut infinite builds, which I think everyone kind of agrees was necessary. So we're going to go over most of the big changes for each of the heroes. And I think you'll see for 90% of the time, it is going to be like charge item nerfs. And there were some changes other than that, but charge item nerfs is definitely like the biggest changes here. So I think the title of this video is going to be like infinite builds are dead or something like that, because it kind of feels like that based off these changes. So let's get into it. Astrolabe now has a scaling cooldown. So the more you level it up, the lower the cooldown. It no longer shields. Not that big of a deal. You didn't really use Astrolabe for the shield. It hastes a non-weapon item for 2 seconds. I think that already existed. But now, instead of charging more the higher level it is, it only charges for 1 second at every level. So it still charges fairly fast at Diamond, but everything before Diamond is a pretty significant nerf. So Astrolabe and pretty much every other charge item got hit pretty much in a similar way. We'll see that when we go down. Barrel is now shield 10 from shield. I don't really get this nerf. I don't think Barrel will be nearly as good now that we have these infinite combos getting heavily nerfed, but I don't really understand why they just said like shield 10 instead of shield, because the whole point of the Barrel is the stacking shield you get over time. Like you don't really care about the base value here. So I think this might have just been like a cleanup thing. There's also another thing to consider, and this is something that I didn't really go over that much last time in the patch notes. No offense to the Tempo Storm people, but the people who write the patch notes, they don't always get it right. There are a lot of errors and inconsistencies in the patch notes versus what actually goes into the game. So I wouldn't be surprised if something like this is kind of just a flub on the patch notes writer's part, and there are more changes to barrel. I saw at least 6 specific different instances of the patch notes just being blatantly wrong last patch, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's more of that. So if I had to give some feedback to Tempo Storm, and obviously it is an open beta, so it doesn't matter that much, but just try to make sure the patch notes are accurate. And I don't want to prejudge them because I don't know if these are inaccurate, obviously, but it is a little frustrating when you read the patch notes and then you get in game and you realize, oh, the patch notes were just wrong. They lied. So yeah, just try to make sure the patch notes are right when you write them. I don't really know how you would do that, but work on it. It would be great. Constructive criticism. That is not a diss to anyone there. Blowgun now starts at gold tier. This is the item that does poison equal to the amount of damage the item has. It was previously only available at diamond, but now you can get it at gold. This item is ridiculously strong. It is basically Vanessa's flamethrower, and flamethrower is one of the strongest items in the game if you can buff it. So now that you can get it earlier, and you can sort of build around it earlier in your run, there's a really good chance that you'll see a lot more blowgun this patch. You kind of don't really see it that much because, one, it's pretty rare at diamond only currently, and two, by the time you get it, you're kind of already locked into a build, and you don't really want to pivot into like a weapon buffing poison build. So it's pretty hard to make blowgun work currently unless you already have a build that works with it. And also, I don't know what the cooldown currently is. Let's see. Oh, it is a 6-second cooldown. Okay, so the cooldown remains the same. So no changes to the item at diamond here, but just having it be available more often is definitely a big buff. Chum, sort of a meme item, but it got doubled in effectiveness. Now it gives double the amount of crit chance that it did before to only your aquatic items. I kind of feel like this is a whiff. I don't think Chum would be bad or like OP if it just gave all of your items crit chance, but maybe that encroaches a little bit too much on items like Vanessa's Amulet, which already give all your items crit chance passively. So I don't think you see Chum getting run in aquatic builds still, because it's just not that much crit chance, and the item doesn't do that much. But I don't know. Maybe you can fit it in if you really, really, really need crit. Like, maybe this opens up more chances to make a Piranha build work. Probably not, but it is nice to see buffs like that. Another big theme of the patch this week, or this patch cycle, is the retyping of a lot of items, I should say. A lot of items lost their tool tag, and they gained a tag like tech. There was a bunch of new tags that got added. Tech, Ray, I think friend. I'm not 100% sure of that. Friend obviously was already a tag, but I think a lot of new cards got it. There's a few others that got added. We'll go over them as we go. I think this is sort of prep for the future of the game, where you have more things that interact with things like the tech type. We can see that in the dually changes coming up later, where dually has a lot of things that interact specifically with tech. So this is sort of just a prep change for stuff like that. Silencer got nerfed pretty significantly. It's better early game until you get it to gold, and then once you get it to diamond, it's 10% worse. That's a pretty significant change. The shiny enchantment got fixed on it, but honestly, if you're putting shiny on your silencer, you probably made a mistake, although the cooldown reduction was pretty insane. So I'm not sure about this. You probably never really saw shiny silencer anyway. Trebuchet's cooldown bug got fixed. This is a really big nerf to Trebuchet, but it was necessary. Previously, it was supposed to be, I think, 10 seconds at all levels. Yeah, it's supposed to be 10 seconds at all levels, but once you hit it silver, it would go to 8 seconds. That is no longer the case. So now it should function as intended. It still charges, I think, 4 seconds at diamond. So this item will still be good, especially in the new meta, where I think the meta has slowed down significantly. So do not weep for Trebuchet. where I think Trebuchet is still really strong. Electric Eels got fixed. Very, very, very minor fix, but it's nice to see it. It was freezing itself when it had the Icy enchantment, but let's be honest, Icy is so incredibly rare that you probably never saw this happen. Illusa Ray and Shark Ray gain the Ray type. This is one of the changes to tags that I mentioned. You'll see a lot more of these down below. Cannonade got buffed pretty significantly. Technically, it is a small nerf at Diamond, but I don't think that this matters that much. I think Cannonade, what's the cooldown? 4 seconds? Yeah. So the difference from 2 to 3 seconds on a 4-second cooldown item is not really that significant because most of the time you still need 2 items going off to charge it. So I think that this is actually overall just a buff to Cannonade because the damage scales up a lot. But I don't really know too much because I don't think Cannonade was actually getting used that much in this meta right now. So I really couldn't tell you. Captain's Wheel got a huge buff, in my opinion. Captain's Wheel was really hard to use. It was pretty much only used in Trebuchet builds because positioning is really tough in a lot of Vanessa builds. And when you have to put like large items adjacent to medium items, it really clogs up a lot of your board. So now Captain's Wheel will still haste adjacent items, but all you have to do is have a vehicle or a large item on your board at all, and the cooldown gets reduced by 50%. This is versus getting the item charged whenever it gets used. This is technically weaker in a couple situations, but overall it makes the item way more flexible. I think it opens up a lot of avenues for just stuffing the Captain's Wheel in your board and hasting specific items, even if they're not the large items. So I like this change a lot. Vanessa already has a lot of ways to haste stuff, but Captain's Wheel was kind of specific to the non-aquatic builds because most of the ways that Vanessa can haste stuff is aquatic based or non-weapon based. So big fan of this Captain's Wheel buff. I think we see this item quite a bit this patch, and we might see something like a submarine build pop off. I think submarine might be really strong in this meta, but we'll see. Catfish got a very small buff, but now poisons 4 at all levels. It still gains the poison every time you haste it, as far as I know. Dock lines, I actually think this is a buff. It now starts at silver tier only instead of bronze tier. And I don't think that this changed at all. I think it still slows the same amount of items at each level. The amount of times where I found dock lines at bronze and I was just like, oh man, I want dock line, but I don't want a bronze dock lines because it's going to be hard to upgrade it. It was a lot. So I think this is technically actually a buff. Even though it will make dock lines a little more rare, you won't see a bronze dock lines anymore, which I think is a really nice change. Another theme of this patch is actually the reversion of a lot of items to the previous patches state. I think this is sort of just like a kind of a desperation play on behalf of the devs, to be honest. They didn't really know what they wanted to do with these items, so they're kind of just like, okay, we'll put them back to what they were, and we'll fix them later at a different date. Because this patch is fairly fast. I think it's only been 2 weeks or so since the last one. So incendiary rounds got reverted to its previous iteration. I can't show it to you here because this is the current iteration, but I think it's just going to be like adjacent items get +2 ammo, and when you use an adjacent item, burn 2 or something like that. So this item kind of doesn't really have much use in the meta currently, but it's just a better cannonball that burns, so you may see it getting slotted into some builds. Javelin got buffed. Item is terrible. Really hard to see it getting used. Vanessa has some really interesting issues with ammo items where some of them will just be, they'll have like a way to reload this, but they're kind of just bad regardless. Like doing 75 on a 4-second cooldown is just not that good for a medium item. And then the reload is like you have to haste it, or you have to haste something. So it's like you don't want to run this in port because you don't need to reload Javelin with port, and you don't really want to run this in aquatic because you don't really want items in aquatic, and it's not an aquatic item. So I don't really know what the point of javelin is. Maybe the cooldown reduction makes a big difference, but I don't think so. Submarine has the tech tag now. Nice. Torpedo has the tech tag now. Nice. Probably doesn't matter too much because I don't think Vanessa has that many things that interact with tech, but maybe in the future. Big nerf, and this is one of the only items that I actually got like 100% correct when I was reading the last patch notes. I saw the original Pearl change, and I like straight up said this item is completely broken. And now that they're nerfing it pretty significantly, I think I'm comfortable saying that this item is like almost dead now. But I could be wrong. They made the shield scale up a little bit more, which is kind of useless. And then they made it so that it's limited to charge 1 second when using another aquatic item instead of 1 to 4. So you're going to see way less infinite builds based off of Pearl and based off of everything else. In the same vein, we're looking at the pufferfish change. They lock the charge rate to 2 seconds instead of scaling up to 4. Pretty big pufferfish nerf, but I think this is actually still playable. It's just going to be slower. Everything is going to be slower this patch, which is good. A lot slower. So I think you will probably still see aquatic builds with pufferfish and like haste and stuff. They're just not going to be like building 10 billion shield and also poisoning you 10 billion. So we'll have to see how this meta hands out, but infinite builds are dead, which is good. Ramrod got redesigned. Good. Ramrod was a awful, completely useless, terrible item. It was outclassed in pretty much every way by like items like either the cannonball or powder flask, and the cooldown was like ridiculously long. This is another example of what I was talking about with the patch notes just being wrong. I think this is supposed to mean the other way. Ramrod currently has an 8-second cooldown, as you can see right here. It says from 4 seconds. I think this is supposed to be now it has a 4-second cooldown from 8 seconds. So not 100% sure if that's what they mean, but I'm going to assume that is. So now it's a short cooldown, which is very nice. It now reloads adjacent items up to 3 ammo. It currently already did that. But it now also gives all ammo items, I think, 40% crit chance at diamond. That's a lot of crit chance, especially if it doesn't have to be adjacent. And then it also charges 1 second whenever one of your items runs out of ammo. So you can put this next to like a throwing knife and like another really fast ammo item. And when those run out of ammo, they're going to get reloaded up to 3 ammo. So I think Ramrod is actually playable now in ammo builds, which is really, really funny. This is sort of like a port replacement item. I think we see this. I don't think you ever run Ramrod and port just because there's not enough space. But you could either run Ramrod early game when you don't have a port, or if you don't have that many items that need ammo reload, maybe you just run Ramrod and reload specific items like a potion or a torpedo or something. I'm not specifically sure what you would want to run with this build, but I think Ramrod is very nice in the niche of this is going to be useful for items that are running a couple of ammo items or a few ammo items and maybe not the whole board of ammo. And it is a nice supplement to port because you either run either of those and you're a lot more happy when you see Ramrod early versus being like, oh, this is just a dead item. Okay, so they did change Trebuchet as well. I don't know why they didn't put this up in the there was another Trebuchet thing, wasn't there? I talked about it. Am I losing my mind? I think I'm losing my mind. Oh yeah, they did it right here. So they did a bug fix for Trebuchet, and then they also did a patch change to it. Okay, so Trebuchet did get changed. The damage now scales again. The burn now scales again, but the charge is locked 2 seconds. It no longer charges up to 4 seconds at diamond. So Trebuchet did get nerfed pretty heavily versus what I originally thought. But the increase in damage and burn is actually pretty significant at higher levels, and I still think you're charging Trebuchet fairly fast in the intended builds, which are like fast weapon / haste builds. So I still maintain that Trebuchet is not dead. It definitely is weaker than I initially thought, though. This is another instance of an item getting reverted to basically what it was pre-patch. You can no longer get Trebuchet starting at bronze, or sorry, Tripwire starting at bronze, and it no longer has a cooldown. It's just when your enemy uses an item, slow for 1 to 2 seconds. So, this is actually a pretty big nerf, I think. Tripwire kind of had its place in the Proboscis meme build, and I think it still has its place in the Proboscis meme builds because Proboscis, spoiler alert, also got reverted to its previous state, which is just when you slow, do damage. So you can still run this with Proboscis, but I still don't really know if there's much of a reason to run this outside of Proboscis, other than if you really, 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 really need slow for something like skills or something like that. So a little sad to see Tripwire get changed like this because I think it limits the item pretty significantly. But I understand why it's necessary, and I think they'll probably revisit this item in the future again. Turtle Shell, to the surprise of no one, kind of got nerfed pretty heavily. The changes to Turtle Shell themselves were pretty brutal, but I also think the changes to other items like Water Wheel and Pearl nerfed Turtle Shell even harder. So Turtle Shell kind of got like double whammied, so to say. So the shield is up. Who cares? Doesn't matter. The scaling is up pretty significantly at higher levels, but the charging is down locked for 1 second for any non-weapon item. So you're going to be charging this very, very, very slowly. And you won't be spamming Pearl builds anymore either. So definitely not going to see Turtle Shell Pearl nearly as much as you used to. And then finally, Water Wheel. Water Wheel, they increased the cooldown at silver, but nerfed it at diamond. So, or sorry, buffed it at diamond. So that's nice for diamond. But the only other change is they locked the charge rate to 2 seconds again. So this is actually just a Water Wheel nerf, pretty much. Actually, it is a Water Wheel buff at specifically silver, but I think, yeah, it's a buff at specifically silver, but at gold and diamond, Water Wheel got nerfed again. I don't actually know if this was 100% necessary, considering that Pearl and Turtle Shell and Pufferfish all got nerfed as well, but I guess we'll see. Sort of the synopsis for Vanessa is her infinites are dead. That is good. That is a good thing. She has a lot more options for weapon builds now. She has a lot more options for pivoting into like maybe a submarine build or an ammo item build. Port may be back on the menu. I kind of think Port was dead this patch, but now maybe it's playable because you don't have to deal with 10 billion shields. So overall, a lot of reduction in power for Vanessa, but I wouldn't cry too much because everyone got a lot of reduction in power. So this is not nearly as bad of a nerf for her items as you might originally think because everyone got nerfed. And speaking of everyone getting nerfed, let's get into the pig item changes because holy moly, he got nerfed. Like crazy nerf. So I think more than so than Vanessa. So first of all, there was a bug fix for Windmill. I wasn't aware this was the case. I don't know if this happened every time, but I actually tried to make Windmill work and it didn't feel that good. But I didn't notice it wasn't charging the item to the left, so maybe that's why it didn't feel good, but I'm not 100% sure. Windmill is probably still a meme item. It's just way too rare, and with infinites becoming way less popular, you probably don't see this that often, but maybe. Apropos chapeau. I don't even know what the issue was. Not important. Okay, here's the meat and potatoes. Bushel got gutted. I think it's even worse than it was 2 patches ago. Because I think it charged for 2 seconds. And this could be the case where the patch is just wrong. The patch notes are wrong again. But I'm going to take it at face value and say that it's just 1 second charge at all levels. The heal amount really doesn't matter at all. I guess it's a little nice if you don't have scaling, but the whole reason you ran Bushel was to enable combos. So this change, along with a lot of the changes you'll see down below, pretty much kills, I think, almost every single infinite build that Pig had. So I don't think you'll ever see infinite Pig again, unless it's something specifically with Yo-Yo, which I don't think got changed, or at least it wasn't in the patch note. So Rip to the Infinite Pigs. Bushel is definitely a big nerf to them. This charge amount is pretty much, I mean, Bushel only does have a 4-second cooldown, so like 1 second is not nothing, but it's very difficult to, like, even a shielded Bushel only charges itself like 1/4 of its cooldown, so I don't know. Doesn't feel good to be a Bushel stan for sure. Caltrops, now you can get them a lot earlier. They start at gold tier, and they deal 1 damage at gold and 10 damage at diamond. Doesn't really matter. The only way to make Caltrops playable is by buffing the damage. So something like Crook, which unfortunately did get nerfed, or maybe augmented weapons or other ways to buff the items will make Caltrops a lot better. Ironically, Caltrops was in such an insane state because infinites were so strong. This is basically the anti-infinite weapon. And now that infinites are basically dead, or at least heavily reduced, I don't think there's really as much of a reason to run the Caltrops anymore, which is funny because now they're going to be so much more common. So kind of sad to see that, but maybe in the future when infinites creep their way back up the board, assuming they are actually dead, which they may not be. They've been wrong before. You may see Caltrops being played, but I don't think there's really much of a reason to play Caltrops in the meta that I'm foreseeing based off this patch. Marbles, it got nerfed pretty heavily. The slow amount doesn't matter that much. This is still limited to only small items, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on that because it doesn't say. But now it only slows 1 item down from 2, and the item scales, but it doesn't really matter that much. And the biggest nerf was it's locked to a 1-second charge from up to 4 seconds. Previously, you could have marbles next to like any item like Matchbox or Yo-Yo or anything like that, and it would be instantly charged at diamond. So you could go infinite based off of like 2 items, which obviously is like way too strong. But at the same time, I think this item, I don't know if it's dead, but it's so much worse now. Same thing with Matchbox. The burn scales a lot higher now, which is actually pretty nice, but the charge rate is limited to 1 second. So you're never really going to see infinite burn spam pig anymore. I still think this item may be playable just based off of the burn increase. Like 7 burn is a lot, but I just don't know how you get this to go off that often in this new pig meta with all the changes to his items. So not 100% sure if Matchbox is still playable. If the lemonade stand interaction still works, which I think it does, a fiery lemonade stand would still be insane with Matchbox because you can get that buff to like 100 burn. But obviously it won't be spamming nearly as much anymore. So not really sure how to feel about this. I think Matchbox is mostly dead. Crook got hit really hard. I think this is kind of a revert to the like 3 to 4 patches ago. I don't remember exactly when Crook was in the game in this state, but they nerfed the base damage of the item itself, which doesn't matter that much, but they also nerfed the scaling damage you get off of having multiple medium items. So previously at diamond, all your medium items would have plus 40 damage based on how many mediums you have, which would usually end up being like around 160 to 200 damage in the late game build. That got almost halved. So Diamond Crook is significantly worse. Silver and Gold Crook are not that much worse. Is like a 20% nerf in the amount of damage, which is a lot, but it's not nearly as much as like this 50% damage nerf. So Diamond Crook is way, way, way less important to get if you are playing Medium Weapon Pig. And I kind of don't think that you really go for Medium Weapon Pig anymore. At least based off the Crook build. But I guess we'll see. Model ship got gutted pretty hard. They locked the charge rate to 1 second. So kind of feel like this item is just dead now. And it's really funny because they reverted duct tape. You'll see duct tape later on in the changes. It will now shield based off adjacent item use, just like it used to. And model ship doesn't anymore. So model ship used to be basically strictly worse duct tape. And now I think model ship is even more strictly worse duct tape, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I think model ship is terrible now, though. Definitely really, really hard to make go like infinite. Fort got a huge rework, basically. This item is almost like nothing like it used to be. They increased the cooldown by almost 100%, so they almost doubled the cooldown. That's fair because I don't think it charges anymore. Yeah, it doesn't charge anymore. So you won't be using Fort to enable infinite item spam anymore. But to make up for that, one, they increased the shield by a lot, which is nice. Doesn't matter that much, but it's nice. And two, I think, okay, this is no longer in the game. I didn't read this correctly originally. Fort no longer increases enemy cooldowns. I'm not 100% sure how to read this. I think this means that your item cooldowns also get increased. I think that's what this means. All item cooldowns are increased from, yeah, I think they just formatted this incorrectly. So your item cooldowns will also get increased by 2 seconds if I'm reading this correctly. And then also, this is the big effect. When your items have a cooldown of 8 seconds or greater, so items like double whammy or Fort, I think, with like, right? Because it will increase it by 1 second. So I think Fort will technically count. They now have +1 multicast. So something like double whammy or at Diamond Lion's Cane, or there are some more items later on that we'll see that have long cooldowns, they will now have multicast. So this sort of like enables like a slow pig build. You want like really slow items that have big effects. So like maybe a skyscraper or double whammy or a lion's cane. Even like a big dog, if you get this to diamonds, will have an 8-second cooldown as long as you don't use CDR. Yeah, don't fuck yourself over with CDR, by the way, if you want to play for it. Because if your item has a cooldown of 6 seconds, you cannot give it any CDR if you want it to utilize for it, because the most you're ever going to get is +2 seconds on this. So just keep that in mind. That's probably a little too advanced theory crafting, but just something to think about. So yeah, we'll see like a slow pig with multicast big items. I don't 100% know if this archetype is going to be good or not. It's interesting. Fort is still a large item though, so like it's really difficult to run Fort and then also a lot of other really slow items that want to go off more, but I don't know, maybe. You could maybe see it. It is a pretty big rework, so I don't really know how to evaluate this, but I think it's a healthy change for the game, because the increase in cooldowns being asymmetrical was really brutal. So now that it's symmetrical, I think it's a lot more fair. And then this effect is just actually really interesting too. So we'll see. This is another instance of the patch notes just being a little confusing, but I'll try to parse it as best as I can for y'all. Vineyard is getting reworked significantly. The cooldown doesn't really matter because it's not a cooldown item anymore. Now, when you use an item, this gains heal equal to the value of that item. So this is like supposed to be like a really big heal item now. And I think the same thing for Landscraper. It's supposed to be a really big shield item. This is just like a patch notes typo, I'm pretty sure. So the idea of Vineyard and Landscraper now is get like a lot of really, really valuable items like truffles or pawn shop. Actually, I guess pawn shop wouldn't even work because you don't use it. But maybe like a really expensive jewelry or something. And then they just gain like a ton of heal or shield. The problem with that is that 8 seconds or like 8 to 7 seconds is such a long time. And maybe the meta won't be quite as fast anymore, so this doesn't matter, but getting like a 10,000 shield on a 8-second cooldown, it's pretty good, but at the same time, like, that's super slow. There's a good chance you could die before this even goes off, so, or like gets up the scale. Not really sure how to feel about this like value oriented pig build. I'm gonna try it because it sounds like fun, and I've wanted like a item value pig build to work, but I don't know if there's enough tools in the game to make it work yet. We'll see. There's some leftovers like deed and stained glass window and truffles and jewelry and things like that, which have support for this, but at the same time, not that excited about it. Regal Blade as well, or Pygmalion's Dagger, I think it's called. The one that gains damage based off its value. Dagger. Yeah, Pygmalion's Dagger. I kind of feel like they should have made this show up at like bronze or like maybe at least silver, so you could start scaling it if they wanted like a value build to go off. Because by the time you get the Pygmalion's Dagger, it's too late to scale it. This is basically just like a bad piggy bank item. So I kind of wanted to see this item get available at silver at the very least, and then you have like a chance to actually make it work. But as of right now, I don't think it's gonna happen. Hogwash's tooltips got fixed. Don't know what that means, but sure. The gumball machine, it gets the toy tag, which I don't know if that even interacts with anything yet, but in the future it might. And then they fixed an issue where if you got a golden gumball machine, it would still charge you gold. Super rare, doesn't really affect it much. Gumball machine is still situationally very strong, but overall, like, pretty hard to make work if you don't have a lot of econ. So I don't know if Gumball Machine's good. I think we're probably going to see a buy-sell meta with Pig, with like Regal Blade and Dog and stuff like that. So you could see Gumball Machine making a little bit of a resurgence, but it's still a lot of gold. Ice Cream Truck got pretty heavily nerfed. I actually think this nerf was completely unjustified. The only reason Ice Cream Truck was getting run at all was because infinites were so strong, and you could just run like Ice Cream Truck with matches and marbles, and it would charge like ridiculously fast. So they nerfed the cooldown by 2 seconds, which is a lot, and they nerfed the freeze duration by a second at max level, which is a lot. Maybe this is another instance where Ice Cream Truck, like there's maybe not something in the patch notes that's supposed to be, but in its current state, it only charges for 1 second on non-weapon cooldown or non-weapon item use. And in the new meta, you're not going to be spamming non-weapon items. So I think Ice Cream Truck is completely dead. Not that I think it was even like that strong to begin with, especially pre-patch. So kind of bizarre to see this, but maybe they know something I don't. Definitely possible. So overall for Pig, the synopsis of him is his infinites are well and truly dead. I think it's almost impossible to get any infinites to work. Notably, Yo-Yo doesn't appear to be on this. They could have just forgotten to nerf it. But Yo-Yo currently is the only Pig item, I think, that still has scaling charge. So you could maybe make Yo-Yo work somehow, but without other items like they spam really fast, I'm not really sure how that works. Like maybe a weights Yo-Yo. I just don't know. I don't know how you make Yo-Yo work now, even if it didn't get nerfed. And then at the same time, it kind of makes me feel like they just forgot to list it here and they nerfed it too. But I could be wrong. We'll see. So Pig, infinites are dead. They want you to do like some sort of weird value build. I don't see it happening. I think we're way more likely to see something like this fort build work, where you just have like really slow big items, or more likely you'll just see like buy, sell, Regal Blade, Dog, Beast of Burden, stuff like that. I think Pig got nerfed pretty hard, which was justified, but at the same time, it feels kind of bad because they didn't really give him many other viable options, I don't think. Whereas Dooley and Vanessa both got like a lot of other archetypes that they can kind of explore. So we'll see. Another thing that to note is it's not in the patch notes, but HP Big is way worse than it was a couple patches ago because you no longer have access to reliable personal trainer level up upgrades and 15% HP level up upgrades. You still get the HP level up upgrades sometimes, but oftentimes you have to choose that over getting something really valuable like a gold tier item or a loot item. So HP Pig is a lot harder to run. Otherwise, I would think that it is still like a viable option with like Lion's Cane and Double Whammy and maybe Pawn Shop. But with HP stacking being so heavily nerfed by those two level up changes, I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. But with the meta slowing down so heavily, it's possible. I think it's possible. We'll have to play around with it a lot, I think. Let's get into Dooley changes. Dooley, I think he got hit the least. of all of the 3 heroes, which kind of makes sense, kind of doesn't make sense. With the very, very, very big exception of Friend Core getting completely gutted, in my opinion. There are some considerations there that we'll go over when we get there, but I think Friend Core got destroyed, basically. Which is good because I think Friend Core was far and away the strongest core, at least the most flexible, especially after this patch. So, first off, duct tape now shields on adjacent item use again. It no longer has like the weird charge effect. A huge buff to Armored Core Dually. Losing access to this shield pretty much killed Armored Core Dually. So we'll probably see like a Force Field Armored Core Dually build just be like a very, very consistent way to play early to mid game. And with duct tape being back to the way it was, I think this is probably like a pretty easy way to just run a simple build that works most of the time. So my prediction is that if you want like a really simple, easy to force build for the new patch, check out Armored Core Dually, because I think it's going to be like super consistent, super easy to force, super easy to run. Don't really know what this means. I don't think it's significant change. First Aiden got a change for if he gets the haste effect. Not important. You don't really ever put haste on First Aiden, I don't think. Ballista got nerfed, but not as heavily as you would have thought. At the same time, the other changes to Friend Core is probably what nerfs Ballista the most, but I actually think this item is still probably playable. They nerfed the amount of damage you get when you haste, and then they nerfed the amount of charge you get when you haste specifically yet. But I think this item still scales really fast in specific builds. Blast Doors got buffed a lot. It now works against burn items. I don't think it did this before. Let me check. I know it does say it does this before. Okay. Okay, maybe this isn't actually as big of a buff as I thought it was. Because this charged up to 4 seconds at diamonds, and now it only charges 2 seconds. They did buff the shield by a decent amount, but like, I don't know. Were people having problems with blast doors? I kind of feel like I never saw this item. It's not really a nerf. It is a nerf. It's a pretty big nerf. I think blast doors kind of just needs a rework to be playable. Maybe with the meta slowing down, it's good now because it's just like a really big shield on a fairly low cooldown if they're spamming like items or burn, but I don't know. A lot of people are saying there's going to be like a poison meta with this patch too, which blast doors is completely worthless against. So if it does end up being a poison meta, then like this item is even worse than it is now. So kind of weird. All the rays get the ray type. That's nice just for consistency. The dinosaurs get the dinosaur type. This sort of implies that we're going to see more dinosaurs in the future, which I would love to see. I'd kind of love to see like a 1-slot dinosaur that doesn't destroy an item. Maybe it like just does damage, or maybe it like slows an item or freezes an item or something. And then we'd like to see like Daddy Soar doing something crazy and having like a really long cooldown. I think would be really interesting. Like maybe you even have the first 4-slot item in the game. I don't really know if that's possible or likely at all, but like Daddy Soar being 4 slots and like destroying their whole board after 50 seconds or something would be pretty cool. But that's just total speculation. I have no idea. Solar Farm, it gains the tech type. This actually matters for Dually. Dually has some stuff that interacts with tech. I don't think many of the other things do. I think there's some skill changes down below that do interact with tech, but as far as I know, Dually's the only one that actually has like tech interaction built into his items. So we'll see those later. The haste duration is sort of scaling now, and the regen scales a little bit too. The burn charge is slightly nerfed at diamonds, but buffed at silver, and the same at gold. So burn Dually was in a weird spot. I think this item is still fine. In fact, I think it's probably stronger now. Just because getting it silver is like, you only really need to have it silver. Because the haste duration is not that important. You can really buff that with like a Curio. And the regen is like, who cares? So Burn Dually gets access to, I think, a fairly strong item, and it does get slightly nerfed at Diamond, but not that heavily. Power Drill. Power Drill finally gets buffed to, I think, a playable state. I think. It doubles the amount of charge it gets when you slow, haste, freeze, burn, or poison. And with infinites being a lot less likely, I don't know how likely this is going to be happen, but the damage is up early too, which is nice because running this early felt really bad. At like 20, a 10-second item having a 20 damage, that's just kind of a slap in the face if you don't have a way to scale it. So the charge rate's up significantly. There are some really interesting builds that you could make work with this. I think. Let me check something real quick. Power Drill. The enchantments are really what you're looking at for this, but it looks like they're all single target, which is smart because if any of these were multi-target, it would charge itself a lot based off of like using itself. So I don't know if this item is playable anymore. It's going to really depend on how likely you are to have like spamming burns or poisons or haste. Haste is a little harder to get on Dually now, so we'll see. Charging 2 seconds is a lot, but it's still a 10-second cooldown, which is a lot. So we'll see. Race Carl got buff nerfed. The damage is up pretty significantly. The charge rate is up at silver, the same at gold, and nerfed at diamond, same as a lot of the other items. The damage being up is nice. It's pretty hard to get Race Carl to diamonds before the super late game anyway, so most of the time this is just a pretty big buff to Race Carl, but at the same time, Friends got nerfed pretty heavily, so I don't think this is going to be that good just because of how heavily Friends got nerfed. So we'll see. Railgun. This is the Ray item before, but now it works off of any tech. So this is one of the first items that interacts specifically with tech. So the damage is up. The items that it can charge based off of are more common. I don't know if the rays are tech, actually. It doesn't say. No, it says rays are rays. So I guess Railgun doesn't really work with rays anymore. It only works with tech. And I'm not 100% sure what the tech items look like. There's not a ton of them that I've noticed. I don't know if the core's tech either. This is something I'll have to look into. It's really hard to evaluate just based off of the patch notes. This item was kind of weird to begin with because Ray Dually was kind of dead this patch. You weren't really running all the rays. But I don't know. Maybe it's playable. It is a lot of damage and it's like a multicast item. So we'll see. Like it's multicast 2 and it does a decent chunk of damage. And if tech is somewhat common, it should charge fairly fast. So we'll see. Arc Blaster, this was that weird item that I don't think anyone ever ran. It's like when you use the core, charge this 1 to 4 seconds. They changed it so that now it charges off of any tech, but it only charges 1 second. And if they didn't change this, it still has an 8-second base cooldown, which is so much. It is a small item, so it's like easier to fit into builds, and it does a lot of damage. But only charging 1 second on an 8-second cooldown, specifically when you use tech, which I don't know how common it is, it doesn't sound very good to me. But we'll see. Cool ADs got gutted pretty hard. The slow duration is up, but it only charges 1 second on core use. This is a huge nerf to Cool ADs. It was one of the strongest items in the game for Dually just because it enabled core spam a little bit more. So, core spam overall, sad, but it's probably necessary. Hamlet got buffed pretty heavily. 2 seconds off his cooldown is nice, but the charge duration or the charge amount got nerfed down to 1 second. So overall, Hamlet is pretty heavily nerfed, even with the damage buffs. And with access to like slow spam being pretty heavily nerfed as well off of cool LEDs, I think it's going to be really difficult to make Hamlet work. I had a few instances where I made like Hamlet my proboscis light, so to speak. And because it's a tool and a friend, it activated some cool combos. But overall, I think this item is just kind of bad now. We'll see. Armadillo charges flat 2 seconds instead of up to 4. Another item that I think is going to be really tough to make work. I actually have a video in the hopper. I don't know if I'll be able to get it out in time for the patch or not, of an infinite Armadillo build, which is the first time I've ever gotten that to work. And it was really cool. So I'm a little sad to see this nerf, but they're nerfing everything that charges, so it makes sense. Microdave got pretty heavily nerfed. I think this item is pretty much close to unplayable now, again. It kind of had like a little bit of time to shine with the ignition core because it would charge so fast at silver to gold level that it would like spam a lot. And you would just be able to like charge your microdave and just pump out burn. But at the same time, it was like ignition core was kind of bad. So kind of sad to see microdave nerfed, but like I said with Armadillo, you got to nerf all the charge stuff just to be consistent. Tesla coil is no longer a tool. It is now tech. So yet another tech item. The damage is scaling up, but this is sort of an interesting change. It's no longer like a fast spam item itself. So now whenever you use adjacent tech, which like we said is not super common yet, it charges an item 1 second. So it doesn't necessarily charge itself. And in fact, I think it doesn't say another item, but it's very unlikely to charge itself. And it still has a really long cooldown, I think. Unless they just didn't include it in the... Yeah, it's a 6-second cooldown. It doesn't charge itself anymore, so you don't really want to use this in like weapon core. This is sort of like some sort of weird tech build. And it charges your other items 1 second, which doesn't feel like that much, but we'll see. Okay, this is the biggest change of the patch, in my opinion, or one of the biggest changes of the patch, especially to Dually. Companion Core now hastes adjacent items instead of all your other friends. So, 1, Companion Core positioning is way more important now. You can only haste 2 items. So you have to choose 2 of your items to haste versus just getting all of your items hasted for free. Massive nerf to Companion Core. But it does open up a little bit more flexibility with Companion Core because that haste is no longer limited to friends only. So a lot of the times when I was running Companion Core, I ran into the situation where like I wanted to run other items that weren't friends, but I'm like, oh, I can't really do anything with this because I don't want to run non-friends because friends are so much stronger. So now Companion Core does have access to a little bit more flexibility, but overall this item just got completely gutted. And now also the upgrading it actually matters a lot more, I think. The haste duration is 2 seconds at bronze, which is nice because it was only 1 second before, but it only charges based off of your friend's usage, and it only tastes 2 items. So gonna be tough to make this one work, I think. At least with the same builds we had before. We'll probably have to see like more focus on getting haste in other ways. And I'm not really 100% sure how this build works now. Like this really, really, really guts Companion Core significantly. Yeah, I don't really know how you make Companion Core work now. I'm sure it's still fine, but it's going to be like a lot different. Brick Buddy got gutted significantly, which is very nice. Brick Buddy, in my opinion, was a sleeper pick for one of the strongest items in the game. It was really funny to see all the barrel hate. People hated barrel, and then nobody really cared about Brick Buddy. When I think Brick Buddy consistently shielded for as much, if not more, than barrel did. So 1, the base shield is down like insanely much at base tier, so that's a pretty significant change. 2, Companion Core got heavily nerfed, so friends in general are just way weaker. And 3, the scaling is significantly less at higher tiers, down to 25 from 40. So you will no longer see Brick Buddy single-handedly shielding like 10,000 damage by itself, which is a really good change. But I do think this is like a insanely big nerf to Brick Buddy when it also got hit by so many other nerfs. So Kind of feels bad to see an item get hit by like the triple, quadruple whammy. Um, I really don't know how Friend Core is going to be played next patch. We're just have to wait and see. Motherboard is now a tech item. The crit modifier now gives the core a crit chance. That's nice, I guess. I don't think motherboard ever gets played. Oh no, this is different. Okay, motherboard actually I think is playable. Motherboard actually I think is good in specifically weapon core dually and crit core dually, and maybe even the core dually. We'll see. This is a really interesting item. I think haste is going to be at much more of a premium in dually now. So any item that has a fairly short cooldown that gives haste, I think is potentially powerful. And then it also scales the core like crazy strong. So like plus 30 damage on the core. That's a lot. So I think motherboard actually is playable. I think crit core dually and weapon dually kind of they dodged a lot of the nerfs this patch. So they did get nerfed by the Tesla coil nerf, and they did get nerfed by cool LEDs. But other than that, I think pretty much everything that they like to use got unchanged. So another contender for like just a really consistent, easy build to go. Check out crit core. Check out weapon damage core. I think you have some options with those cores now. Okay, so here's the big change that I need to see for tech items. The cores are all tech, antimatter chamber, all of these, blah, 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 blah. Most of these items were bad. Like claw arm's terrible. Cool ADs is tech now. I don't think it's tool anymore. Cooling fans, force field, blah, 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 blah. So Dually does have access to a lot more tech items than I originally thought, which opens up room for things like solar farm, where is it? Tesla coil, and there was like a railgun. It opens up those builds to be a lot more viable because you just have like a lot of options of fairly good items that are tech. And I think red button actually has a chance to be playable here. Red button was a fairly long cooldown item that charges adjacent large items up to 4 seconds. Like that's a lot. And it's a tech item, so like I think you could maybe see red button used in, I don't know, some sort of large item dually build. It does do pretty well next to solar farm. It does do pretty well next to railgun. It does do pretty well against like a Mamasaur or like I don't know, something else. So we'll see. It's interesting. Most of these items I think are still terrible. Like Nitro I think is terrible. Memory card, weirdly bad, but I think still playable early game just to get some gold. Light bulb is interesting. Giving items crit is strong, but it's just pretty weak in general. And a lot of these, I don't know. We'll have to see if they're playable post patch, but most of them felt bad. GPU, I think, is actually playable now with motherboard specifically. I would not be surprised if you saw like a motherboard GPU crit core or like weapon core combo, just doing a lot of damage with the core. All of these items lost their tool tip or tool type, sorry. Which is not that big of a deal, except for specifically some of the skills that interact specifically with tools. So there's like that multicast skill, which I don't even know if it's still in the game because there was a ton of skill changes down here. We'll go ahead into them. I gotta hurry up because I've already been talking for a long time. But these losing tool I don't think is that big of a deal. I think it was kind of just like a cleanup thing. But it could technically make them a little bit weaker in some situations. But they're tech now, so could be good. Atomic Clock, I just want to call this item out. Super underrated item in my opinion. I think Atomic Clock is actually really, really, really strong if you have a way to give it more ammo or reload it. But now that infinites no longer rule the meta, I don't think there's much of a reason to run this, except for it is like a really fast item that does disrupt the enemy. So we'll see. I think Atomic Clock still has a chance to be strong. You just need a way to reload it. These lost tool, doesn't matter that much. Okay, We're not going to go into all of these because most of these are pretty small and we've already been talking a lot, but we'll just quickly go through them. Octopus got buffed when it's shiny. Multi-tool has enchantments that actually work now. Multi-tool is kind of a hard item to get, but it's just overall decent. I don't even know what Void Ray is. I think this is the item you get off of the, yeah, this is like the weird item you get off of the Void Colossus. It's now a ray. Whoopee! Earrings? I don't think I've ever seen anyone use this item before. Let's see. Yeah, this is like a monster item you get from Mac or something. It's like a slow build enabler. Let's see. The cooldown's slightly lower. You gain a lot more max health when it actually goes off. Okay, this is like a better Walter cooler now, actually. I would run an earrings just to like get a lot of max HP early if I got it. And then the charge is like just a bonus. Honestly, I would totally run this item in PvE fights just to farm some max HP. Pendulum now hastes specific amounts of items instead of just all your items when you crit. It gives a slightly more crit chance to adjacent items, and then it charges a consistent amount. Pendulum actually had some gas going for it this patch, just because hasting all of your items was really good, and a lot of times you could get like free crit chance. So this is a pretty big nerf to Pendulum, I think, but it is better in some situations. It's just hard to level up. Oven Mitts was also one of those items that kind of gets used a little bit, but really only in like the infinite burn pig build. So I don't really think this needed to get nerfed, even though it kind of like got nerf buff. I guess this is actually a buff because you're really not ever really going to get your Oven Mitts to diamonds without specifically committing really hard to it. So this is actually a pretty big buff. Proboscis, this is the big nerf of the patch. Proboscis, I think, unironically, was one of the strongest items in the game. It was really easy to pick up by either fighting the mosquito or getting the curio. You couldn't always upgrade it, but when you could, it became really, really, really easy to get infinite builds going, especially if you happen to luck into a heavy enchantment, which would make it go infinite off of itself nearly all the time. So they just reverted it to when you slow, deal damage. So once again, it's meme status. There's never any real reason to upgrade the item, which I think is good because it always feels bad to have to like burn your guaranteed upgrades on an item that you can't upgrade any other way. But it is a lot harder to make this work. I think we'll see Proboscis in pretty much the same slot it was last patch, like the previous patch, where if you have like some sort of crazy slow build cooking, you can still make it work, but it's a lot harder to make it just like instantly good now. Weather Machine is no longer a tool, but it's now a tech. This item got nerfed last patch to 5-second cooldown, undeservedly, I think. And now that it's not a tool anymore, you can't even multicast it with that skill. So I kind of think this item is just terrible. Maybe I'm undervaluing the stats, but like the burn is pretty much useless. The freeze is okay, but 1 second of freeze on one item is not that good. And then the slow is So this item is sort of just like an enabler for Weather Glass in my opinion, but it does have a lot of tags on it. So potentially has some use there just as like, cause it's a vehicle or cause it's a tech item or cause it's a large property, that kind of thing. I don't think we're going to see much Weather Machine though. Neurotoxin, it got reverted to its previous state, way less easy to spam. Still good in Proboscis meta, I think, if you can play it. Cryo Sleeve, this was like the weird item that froze all of your other items, right? Cryo Sleeve, oh no, this was like the weird item that froze itself. And then it shields whenever anything freezes. Or no, it charged when anything freezes. This was a weird item. Now it freezes itself and adjacent items. It has a much shorter cooldown, but it shields on freeze. Whenever one of your items gains freeze, reduce the duration by half. Okay, so this is like a anti-freeze item, and you sort of just like try to put it in the corner and freeze something that doesn't matter. this is weird. The rapid thaw skill got removed this patch. I don't know if for balance reasons or for bug reasons. I think for both. So freeze is going to be a lot stronger, although with the removal of infinite builds, freeze is a little less scary because like the scariest freeze was always an icy enchantment on like a really, really fast item. And now that most items aren't that fast and icy enchantments are still like really, really rare, I don't think freeze is going to be that scary, especially with a lot of the freeze skills, I think, still being pretty heavily nerfed from last patch. So this is like an anti-freeze tech item, and I kind of like it. It's sort of like a dually scarf, and it also benefits when you freeze the enemy too with a pretty big shield. So like if you can somehow get like some crazy freeze build going, you could slot this in to like the corner and put it next to like a property or like an item that doesn't get used, and just negate the downside. Actually, I don't know how this math works. I don't think you can freeze for half a second, right? So does the reduction by half make it so that it just doesn't freeze at all? Or will it still freeze for 1 second? I have to test that. I'm pretty sure this doesn't make it so it doesn't freeze at all, because I think that would be OP, maybe? I'm not sure. This item I think is actually really interesting now. There's some room to play with this. It's like a fairly big shield. It's a low cooldown item, which don't discount low cooldown items. They're strong. And it's anti-freeze omnipresent. So interesting. Venom was like that weird thing where it would charge fast when you use an adjacent weapon. This item was only really useful to enable like item spam. I think it's pretty much worthless now, but we'll see. Okay, skill changes. We can't go over all of these, so I'm just going to go over the big ones. Cauterize, Rapid Thaw, and Stoutfire removed. Rapid Thaw was one of the strongest skills in the game just to counter freeze. Removing it, I think, was probably the right call because it just like single-handedly nullified freeze. I kind of think they could have nerfed it, but removing it was probably better. I don't remember what Cauterize was. I think this was like when you gain burn. Yeah, when you gain burn heal. This one was just awful. Stoutfire was somewhat good in some situations, but it was just too strictly focused on anti-burn, which I don't think was that common. So removing it was probably the right choice. They added a bunch of skills. We're only going to go over the highlights. This one seems bad. This one seems terrible. This one seems really easy to... This one seems actually really insane. If you have at least 7 items, your items have their cooldowns reduced. I think 7 items is super achievable. You just kind of have to have like more than 2 to 3 small items, and you're kind of cooking already. So that's a lot of CDR for just a passive thing. Tiny Dancer, I think, is really strong for Pig specifically because usually he has a lot of small items, but maybe Vanessa and Dooley as well. Dooley actually has a lot of small items too. Noisy Cricket. This is sort of just like another nice to have weapon buff. It's not that much damage. So it's not insane, but like you pick this up on Vanessa probably and are happy when you have just like a lot of small weapons that they all get buffed. Not that important. They changed a lot of like the charge skills to have a limited number of charges. So no longer will you have builds that just like infinitely go off forever because they're not limited. So a lot of these are just like that. It's just like when you, the first 5 to 10 times you do something, charge an item, that's just going to make the meta way less infinite heavy around these skills, which I think is a good change. It allows a lot more front-loaded power, which I think lets you play some interesting builds, but doesn't make them like insanely OP and just going off each other. This is an interesting skill. This is sort of just like the Desperate Cleanse, but better. I don't know what tier this is. It might be Diamond. Healing for 30% of your max health and cleansing half burn and poison. That's a pretty big change. Or that's a pretty big effect. I'm just going to skip a lot of these. This video is so long already. Most of these skill changes are really just slowing down like charge bullshit. Like haste and charge. And the rest of them aren't that important, I don't think. I'm just going to try to skim them so I don't skip something super important. Yeah, these are all just like when you use an item the first 5 times. Blah, 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 blah. Temporal Strike is limited to 5 times. This was one of the strongest skills in the game. If you have one weapon slow an item, this was like really, really powerful for specific builds, like Proboscis or something like that. So limiting this is good. Mixed messages, again, one of those things that really allowed things like Ballista to pop off because you would just gain a ton of free haste for specifically Ballista. So now no longer infinite and it charges instead of haste. So good nerfs. Same thing with this. Looks like they kind of just nerfed all of the insane skills, which I think is a good change. Bloodhound got buffed, actually. Oh, right, it starts at silver tier now. Okay, so it got nerfed. I think Bloodhound was really strong early game. More just like specific skills. This depth charge is like a really interesting skill because it was completely worthless in my opinion. Like the only reason you would run this is you want like a one weapon aquatic ammo item, which is like I think the only thing that has all of those factors is torpedo, right? Like this is the only aquatic ammo item, I think, or one of the only ones that is a weapon. Can I actually check that? Ammo and aquatic. Yeah, I can. Okay. Yeah, so it's just harpoon and torpedo. So like this was like a harpoon and torpedo skill. It kind of still seems like it's that. I don't understand what the point of this item is. I don't know. Maybe you can make it work. Yeah, more only limited amount of uses. Really good change. Going to make all of these skills way less OP. And I don't think it kills them either. Like limiting the uses just makes it so that they don't just like go infinite off of themselves, which I think is good. A lot of these freeze skills got nerfed. Yeah, I think that's the biggest change. This is also a really big nerf, but I think it doesn't matter at all. Building Crescendo is, in my opinion, one of the strongest skills in the game that you could like consistently get. It was pretty easy to get this skill because you're almost always going to see a crit skill vendor and it pops up pretty commonly from them. With infinites being less strong, it is way less strong. And now you have to use 10 items before you even get any benefit from this. So it's like a lot slower. But at the same time, like you're almost guaranteed to have like 100% crit after like 10 seconds into a fight. So Building Crescendo is still really good. I don't think this was really the way you nerf this, actually. I think if you wanted to slow it down, the best way to slow it down was just like reduce the amount of crit you get per proc. Because now this just makes it way worse on slow item builds, which it was already really bad on. And it's basically the same on like really fast item builds. So not 100% sure why they did this nerf, but I understand why they nerfed it. I just don't understand why they did this specific nerf. Okay, that was all the big changes. Let's just go over the other fixes just real quick, just to make sure there's nothing major there. Looks like just a lot of bug fixes. I saw this and I thought they were nerfing Lemonade Stand, which I was really hoping they did, but I think this is just specifically for like if you see a Lemonade Stand that's enchanted in the merchant, you could like still use it, which is funny, but that's the only change. Everything else doesn't seem to matter. You can now see opponents' ranks, which is huge. You can now see if you're getting shit on by like a master player or a bronze player. That's really nice. Monsters might not drop skills. They fixed that. It's really hard to evaluate how often that happens because you don't know what you're going to get. Sped up item rotation in the chest opening scene doesn't matter at all. They need to just fix the item animations or like the animations in general. They're really slow. Okay, that was it. That was all the changes. It took me a lot longer than I was hoping to get through these. I think I rambled a little bit too much on a lot of this, but I'm pretty happy with this patch. I think this brings the overall power level of the game significantly down, which I think is a really good change. We're going to see a lot more flexibility. You're going to be able to pivot a lot easier. You won't be getting crushed by specific builds once you get to day 10. Like, you won't just like instantly die if you don't have a counter to like item spam Vanessa or item spam Dooley or item spam Pig, because those aren't going to be nearly as common. They offered some changes that give you some other options for each hero. I think each hero has a new build path to kind of explore and feel out. I don't know if they're going to be good, but we're going to see. I think Dooley got overall the biggest amount of like actual meta changes in terms of what you're going to have to relearn to play this character. The tech type is going to be really interesting. The change to companion core, huge nerf, going to be really interesting to know how to replay that character, like relearn how to play him. But overall, I think Dooley is kind of the big winner of this patch, just in terms of he's going to be really easy to play crit core, weapon core, and shield core. I think those are 3 really easy cores to play, and you're almost guaranteed to get like one of those 3 when you pick. So if you're just looking for like a really good build to spam when the fat patch first comes out, which is hopefully soon, my vote is try Dooley and try to get crit core, weapon core, or shield core. I think shield core is probably the easiest, just because force field and duct tape are so easy to get, and they were hit the least by the nerfs. So those are my thoughts. Didn't intend this to be so long, but I appreciate everyone sticking with me if you watched this far. I have a couple videos from pre-patch that I don't want to get out soon. I don't really like releasing pre-patch videos in the post-patch meta because it's a little confusing, but I just haven't been able to make as many videos recently due to life and work and stuff. So if you like the videos, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get them out. It's just tough. Other than that, thanks for watching this video, and I'm going to go and stream some more games, hopefully.